The light of 1,000 distant stars filtered through the crystalline dome of Nexus Prime's central hall, casting a soft, ethereal glow across the assembled representatives. Elder Zartok stood at the center of this cosmic gathering, his imposing figure a testament to centuries of galactic diplomacy and conflict. His scales, once a vibrant emerald, had faded to a muted silver, each shade telling a story of encounters, negotiations, and battles witnessed across multiple star systems. The Elder's eyes, however, remained sharp and penetrating, holding a depth that spoke of wisdom far beyond his physical appearance. Around him, the representatives of the Galactic Confederation represented a breathtaking diversity of sentient life. To his left, the crystalline beings of the Lumina Collective shimmered with internal light, their translucent forms catching and refracting the ambient illumination. On his right, the silicon-based lifeforms from the Karis Reach stood in stark geometric formations, their angular bodies a contrast to the fluid movements of the other delegates. Zartok remembered a time when such a gathering would have been impossible. Centuries of conflict, mistrust, and territorial disputes had kept species isolated, each believing in their own superiority. But something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in the galactic landscape. And at the heart of that transformation lay a species that most had initially overlooked. Distinguished representatives, Zartok began, his voice a deep resonance that seemed to vibrate through the molecular structure of the hall. I stand before you today to share a story that will challenge everything you believe about survival, innovation, and potential. A subtle murmur rippled through the assembly. Elder Zartok was known for many things, but dramatic introductions were not typically among them. He was a diplomat of measured words, of careful calculations. This invitation to a story felt different. The holographic systems around the hall began to activate, responding to some unseen command. Zartok's neural interface, a delicate network of quantum processors that wrapped around his cranial ridge, connected seamlessly with the station's communication grid. Images began to form, snapshots of encounters, battle sequences, moments of unexpected triumph. Humanity, he said, and the name itself seemed to carry a weight that silenced the previous murmurs. The Lumina representatives leaned forward, their crystalline structures catching and refracting the holographic displays. The Karis delegates adjusted their geometric formations, sensors extending to capture every nuance of the incoming data. Zartok knew the challenge before him. How could he explain a species that defied conventional understanding? How could he make these sophisticated ancient civilizations understand the remarkable journey of humans? His mind drifted to his first personal encounter with humans. It had been during a diplomatic mission to their solar system, a time when most galactic civilizations considered them a marginally interesting species, confined to a single planet and struggling with their own internal conflicts. But even then, something had been different. The holographs began to shift, showing images of human cities, of technological developments, of moments of both incredible conflict and profound cooperation. Each image was a puzzle piece, waiting to be understood. What I am about to share, Zartok continued, is not just a historical account. It is a revelation of potential. It is a story of a species that emerged from the most unlikely circumstances to become a force that would reshape our understanding of intelligence, adaptation, and collective achievement. The hall was now absolutely silent. Every representative, regardless of their biological or technological composition, was focused entirely on the Elder. Zartok allowed himself a slight smile, almost imperceptible but present. He knew the journey he was about to describe would challenge everything they thought they knew about the nature of intelligent life. Let me tell you about humanity, he said, and the battles that would change the course of galactic history. The holographic display shifted, revealing the stark, icy landscape of Europa. Jupiter's moon transformed into an unexpected battlefield. Elder Zartok's neural interface projected memories with crystalline clarity, allowing the assembled representatives to witness the conflict as if they were present. The Krex Imperium had been the undisputed masters of galactic conquest for 7 centuries. Their warships were technological marvels, kilometers-long vessels that could reduce entire planetary systems to cosmic dust. Each ship was a monument to overwhelming force, crewed by generations of warriors bred for a singular purpose: total domination. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the RSS Defiance, a research vessel hastily converted into a defensive platform. Around her, a makeshift fleet assembled, a collection that would have seemed comical to any traditional military strategist. Research ships with scientific equipment repurposed as weapon systems, orbital defense platforms cobbled together from decades of solar system infrastructure. Even civilian transport vessels, their cargo holds transformed into makeshift ammunition storage. The Krex fleet approached with calculated arrogance. Their commander, High Strategist Voxnak, had conquered over 50 inhabited worlds. Humanity was to be nothing more than another footnote in their expansive history of subjugation. "Incoming transmission," announced the ship's communication officer, her voice steady despite the impossible odds. The holographic display of Voxnak materialized, a towering creature of metallic exoskeleton and cybernetic augmentations. His multiple eyes scanned the human fleet with a mixture of contempt and mild amusement. "Inhabitants of the third planet," Voxnak's translation matrix produced a mechanically precise voice. "Your resistance is futile. Surrender your colonies, and we may consider preserving a portion of your population for labor allocation." Commander Rodriguez's response was immediate and unexpected. "We don't do surrender," she said, her voice calm but carrying an underlying steel that momentarily confused the Krex strategist. The first wave of Krex destroyers moved into attack position, their weapon systems charging with enough energy to vaporize entire continents. They expected a panicked, desperate defense. Instead, they encountered something entirely different. The human fleet began to move. But move was an inadequate description. The vessels began a complex, almost organic dance around Jupiter's gravitational field. Research vessels that had spent decades studying planetary mechanics now transformed those scientific insights into a revolutionary tactical approach. Small fighter craft, originally designed for asteroid research, used Jupiter's intense gravitational wells as slingshot mechanisms. They would accelerate to impossible speeds, strike critical systems on the massive Krex vessels, and then use the planet's gravity to redirect their approach with surgical precision. Electromagnetic disruption fields, developed for solar research, were repurposed to create localized interference that compromised the Krex ship's advanced targeting systems. What should have been a simple extermination became a nightmarish engagement of constant redirection and unexpected attacks. Voxnak watched in growing disbelief as his carefully orchestrated assault devolved into chaos. Massive destroyer-class vessels found themselves vulnerable to attacks from vessels a fraction of their size. The humans weren't fighting like a traditional military. They were fighting like a complex adaptive organism. A research vessel would draw fire, only to reveal that its damage was an elaborate holographic projection. Another would use its scientific scanning equipment to create precise gravitational calculations that allowed supporting vessels to strike with pinpoint accuracy. The battle wasn't just a military engagement, it was an improvisational symphony of scientific understanding, technological creativity, and an almost instinctive approach to conflict that defied all established military doctrine. 3 hours into the engagement, half of the Krex invasion force had been destroyed. Not through superior firepower, but through an approach to warfare that was simultaneously scientific, strategic, and fundamentally unpredictable. When the final Krex vessel retreated, it did so not in an orderly withdrawal, but in a panic that bordered on existential terror. Commander Rodriguez looked out at the battlefield, Jupiter's massive form filling the viewport. Around her, the crew, scientists more than soldiers, began to realize they had just rewritten the fundamental understanding of interstellar conflict. Elder Zartok's voice cut through the memory. This was humanity's first true introduction to the galactic stage, he told the assembled representatives. Not as conquerors, not as victims, but as something entirely unexpected. The holographic display shimmered, transforming into a landscape of interconnected neural pathways. a visual representation of the most extraordinary psychological conflict in galactic history. Elder Zartok's neural interface projected memories that defied conventional understanding of mental warfare. The Mindweaver Collective had existed for millennia, a civilization that had perfected the art of psychological manipulation. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. Their power lay in something far more insidious: the ability to infiltrate minds, to reshape thoughts, to break the very essence of individual consciousness. For generations, they had systematically subdued entire civilizations. Resistance was futile. A single Mindweaver could enter a planetary network and reduce millions of minds to docile, controllable entities. Entire cultures would be rewritten, their history erased, their individual identities dissolved into a collective submission. When they first approached human colonies, they expected the same swift capitulation that had defined their countless previous conquests. Dr. Arya Chen sat in the Psychological Defense Center on Ganymede Colony, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Around her, a team of researchers, psychologists, neuroscientists, and survivors of previous psychological conflicts worked with an intensity that bordered on desperation. The first wave of mental invasion came without warning. A typical Mindweaver assault would overwhelm a species' collective consciousness in moments. Memories would blur, individual identities would fragment, and resistance would crumble. But something extraordinary happened when they encountered human minds. Instead of a uniform, easily manipulated landscape, the Mindweavers found themselves in a chaotic, dynamic environment that defied all their established invasion protocols. Human consciousness was not a structured network to be systematically conquered. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of experiences, traumas, hopes, and individual narratives. Where the Mindweavers expected uniformity, they discovered complexity. Each human mind responded differently. A scientist's mental landscape was an intricate web of analytical thoughts and scientific curiosity. A survivor of personal trauma had mental defenses forged through extraordinary resilience. An artist's consciousness was a swirling, unpredictable realm of creativity that resisted standard infiltration techniques. Dr. Chen and her team had been studying psychological defense mechanisms for years. They understood something fundamental that the Mindweavers had never encountered. Trauma, diversity, and individual experience could be transformed into a powerful defensive mechanism. The first Mindweaver infiltration teams found themselves caught in mental landscapes that actively resisted their presence. Attempts to reshape memories were met with unexpected counterstrikes. A soldier's memories of loss became a weapon, transforming psychological invasion into a painful, disorienting experience for the invaders. Some human minds didn't just resist, they attacked. Psychological techniques developed from trauma therapy, meditation practices, and advanced neurological research created mental shields that were simultaneously defensive and offensive. The Mindweavers found themselves experiencing the very emotions they had sought to suppress: fear, confusion, individual pain. An artist's memory of personal loss became a sharp, cutting emotional weapon. A scientist's analytical mind created logic loops that trapped and disoriented the invaders. A child's pure, unfiltered emotional experience became an impenetrable fortress. The Mindweaver Collective began to lose operatives at an unprecedented rate. Entire invasion teams would retreat, their collective consciousness traumatized by experiences they could not process or understand. Dr. Chen watched the battle unfold through complex neural monitoring systems. This was more than a conflict. It was a fundamental challenge to the Mindweavers' understanding of consciousness itself. They expected uniformity, she whispered to her team. But humans are anything but uniform. The psychological defense became a turning point. For the first time in their history, the Mindweaver Collective encountered a species that did not just resist invasion, they transformed the very nature of mental conflict. Elder Zartok's voice cut through the memory. Humanity demonstrated that the mind is not a territory to be conquered, he told the assembled representatives. It is a dynamic, living landscape of infinite complexity. The holographic display transformed, revealing the lush yet precarious landscape of New Horizon. World teetering on the edge of ecological destruction, Elder Zartok's neural interface projected memories that captured a moment of extraordinary human collaboration and innovation. New Horizon had been identified as a prime candidate for corporate terraforming. Global Horizon Enterprises, a massive, interstellar development corporation, saw the planet as nothing more than a potential resource, a blank canvas to be reshaped, manipulated, and exploited for maximum economic return. The indigenous ecological network was complex beyond human initial understanding. Microscopic organisms created intricate communication systems that spanned entire continents. Fungal networks acted as neural pathways, connecting plant life in ways that defied traditional biological classifications. The planet itself seemed to pulse with an interconnected intelligence that most scientific models couldn't comprehend. Dr. Maya Rodriguez stood at the intersection of multiple disciplines. A computational ecologist with a background in genetic engineering, indigenous, cultural preservation, and planetary systems analysis, she represented a new breed of scientific thinker. Around her, an unlikely alliance had formed: scientists, local inhabitants, environmental experts, and even some forward-thinking corporate employees. The initial corporate terraforming plan was brutally simple. Massive atmospheric processors would reshape the planet's environment. Entire ecosystems would be stripped, replaced with standardized agricultural and industrial zones. Efficiency was the only metric that mattered. But something extraordinary happened. Instead of traditional resistance, the human team approached the challenge with a revolutionary perspective. They didn't see the planet as a resource to be conquered, but as a complex system to be understood and protected. Dr. Rodriguez and her team began developing adaptive biotechnology that could communicate with the planet's existing ecological networks. Traditional terraforming became a dialogue rather than a destructive process. Genetic modification techniques were refined to work in harmony with existing biological systems rather than replacing them. Local indigenous groups, who had lived on New Horizon for generations, brought invaluable knowledge. Their traditional ecological understanding, passed down through generations, provided insights that no corporate satellite survey could reveal. They understood the subtle communication systems of the planet's biological networks. Corporate employees began to see the project differently. What had started as a simple resource extraction mission became a complex ecological preservation effort. Some even began to challenge the fundamental approach of their own organization. The adaptive biotechnology developed was nothing short of revolutionary. Nanoscale environmental processors could communicate with existing ecological networks. They could identify potential disruption points and develop mitigation strategies in real time. The technology didn't impose a new environment. It worked to enhance and protect the existing ecological balance. Agricultural zones were redesigned to work in harmony with the planet's existing biological communication systems. Crops were developed that could integrate with the existing fungal networks, creating a symbiotic relationship instead of a destructive one. Global Horizon Enterprises found itself facing a transformation it never anticipated. What was supposed to be a simple terraforming project became a comprehensive ecological preservation and enhancement initiative. Dr. Rodriguez stood in a research facility that had once been a corporate planning center. Now, it was a collaborative space where scientists, indigenous experts, and progressive corporate representatives worked together. Holographic displays showed intricate ecological networks, demonstrating how human technology could work in harmony with existing planetary systems. "We're not conquering the planet," she would often say. "We're learning to communicate with it." The project became a galactic case study of collaborative ecological management. New Horizon was not transformed into a standardized industrial zone, but evolved into a complex, thriving ecosystem that balanced human technological innovation with existing planetary intelligence. Elder Zartok's voice cut through the memory. "Humanity showed us that progress is not about domination," he told the assembled representatives. "It's about understanding, communication, and finding a path of mutual survival." The holographic display continued to shimmer, revealing a world where technology and nature existed in a delicate, beautiful balance, a testament to human potential for adaptation and cooperation. The holographic display dissolved into a complex web of quantum connections, shimmering lines of light that represented the most intricate communication networks in galactic history. Elder Zartok's neural interface projected a memory that would challenge everything known about technological warfare. The quantum network was considered the ultimate technological achievement of the Galactic Confederation. Billions of interconnected quantum processors created a communication system believed to be absolutely impenetrable. Encryption algorithms so complex that breaking them was thought to be mathematically impossible. Quantum entanglement provided instantaneous communication across thousands of light years. Kai Chen sat in a research facility that looked more like an artist's studio than a technological command center. Walls covered with seemingly random diagrams, holographic displays dancing, with complex mathematical equations and an atmosphere of controlled chaos. Around him, a team of researchers that defied traditional military or technological classifications worked with an intensity that bordered on obsession. What made the human approach unique was their fundamental perspective on technological systems. Where other civilizations saw rigid structures, humans saw living, adaptive networks. Where others sought to break systems, humans sought to understand them from within. The first indication of human capability came during a routine security test. The Galactic Confederation had invited various technological experts to attempt to breach their quantum network, a demonstration of its supposed invulnerability. Most attempts were pathetic, quickly shut down by multiple layers of quantum encryption. Kai's team approached the challenge differently. Instead of trying to break through the network, they began to understand its fundamental language. They developed an approach that was part mathematical exploration, part artistic interpretation, and part biological mimicry. Their first breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. A team member with a background in improvisational music realized that quantum network communication followed patterns similar to complex musical compositions. What seemed like impenetrable encryption was actually a language waiting to be understood. Mathematical models were developed that didn't just attempt to crack the encryption, but sought to communicate within its own linguistic structure. It was less about breaking through and more about learning to speak the network's native language. Quantum processors began to respond in unexpected ways. Where previous attempts at network infiltration were like battering rams against a fortress, the Adam human approach was more like a sophisticated conversation. They didn't attack the network. They became part of it. During a critical demonstration, Kai's team managed to not just access the Galactic Confederation's quantum network, but to do so in a way that left no trace. They could redirect information, create invisible pathways, and essentially rewrite the network's fundamental communication protocols. The implications were staggering. Entire communication grids could be subtly manipulated. Critical infrastructure could be accessed without any traditional signs of intrusion. The very concept of network security was being reimagined. What made this approach truly remarkable was its philosophical underpinning. This wasn't about destruction or conquest. It was about understanding, communication, and the recognition that technological systems are living, evolving entities. Military strategists from various civilizations watched in disbelief. The humans weren't just breaking through defenses. They were demonstrating a level of technological understanding that challenged fundamental assumptions about communication, encryption, and network design. Kai looked at his team, a diverse group of researchers who represented a new approach to technological exploration. Mathematicians worked alongside musicians, programmers collaborated with linguists, quantum physicists discussed concepts with neuroscientists. We're not just accessing a network, Kai would often say. We're learning to have a conversation with technology itself. The quantum network wars became less about conflict and more about a fundamental reimagining of technological communication. Humans showed that the most powerful technology isn't about building higher walls, but about understanding the language of connection. Elder Zartok's voice cut through the memory. Humanity revealed that technology is not a tool to be controlled. he told the assembled representatives. "It is a living system waiting to be understood." The holographic display continued to shimmer, a complex, beautiful representation of a new way of perceiving technological connection. The holographic display transformed into a complex, three-dimensional map of interstellar relationships, a tapestry of connections that defied traditional diplomatic understanding. Elder Zartok's neural interface projected memories that would challenge everything known about galactic negotiations. The Stellar Concordance Conference was supposed to be another routine diplomatic gathering. Representatives from over 30 different species sat in a massive orbital station, each delegation separated by carefully maintained buffer zones. Centuries of mistrust, territorial disputes, and historical conflicts created an atmosphere thick with unspoken tensions. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez arrived with an approach that immediately set her apart. Where other diplomats carried centuries of grievance, she carried something unexpected: genuine curiosity and a profound belief in collective potential. The primary conflict seemed insurmountable. The Keras Reach, a silicon-based civilization, had been in a centuries-long territorial dispute with the Lumina Collective. Water-rich planets near their border had become a flashpoint of continuous tension. Previous negotiations had always devolved into aggressive posturing, with each side viewing diplomacy as a zero-sum game. Elena's first move was unconventional. Instead of presenting legal arguments or territorial claims, she arrived with a comprehensive, ecological study. The report detailed how the disputed planets could be managed as a shared ecological preserve, creating value for both civilizations beyond mere territorial control. But it was her method of presentation that truly surprised the assembled representatives. She began by sharing personal stories. A narrative from a Keras researcher about their homeworld's geological challenges. A memory from a Lumina elder about their species' journey of survival. These were not simply diplomatic talking points. They were human connections that transformed abstract negotiations into deeply personal conversations. The diplomatic team behind Elena was equally remarkable. Scientists worked alongside cultural experts. Linguists collaborated with environmental specialists. Each team member brought a unique perspective, breaking down the traditional barriers of diplomatic engagement. During a critical negotiation session, when tensions seemed ready to erupt, Elena introduced an unexpected element: a collaborative research proposal that would benefit both civilizations. The project wasn't about compromise. It was about mutual discovery. The Keras representatives, known for their logical approach, found themselves intrigued. The Lumina Collective, with their emphasis on collective experience, saw possibilities where they had previously seen only conflict. What made the human diplomatic approach unique was its fundamental rejection of zero-sum thinking. Diplomacy wasn't about winning or losing. It was about finding paths of mutual understanding and shared progress. A breakthrough came when Elena proposed a joint ecological management initiative. The disputed planets would become a shared research zone, with resources and discoveries equally distributed. Scientific teams from both civilizations would work together, creating a collaborative framework that transformed potential conflict into an opportunity for collective advancement. Thadi, negotiations expanded. Other species, initially watching with skepticism, began to see a new model of interstellar cooperation. Human diplomats didn't just negotiate. They facilitated conversations that revealed shared hopes and challenges. Cultural exchange programs were established. Research initiatives that had seemed impossible became collaborative realities. The very language of diplomatic engagement began to shift. Ambassador Rodriguez understood something fundamental. True diplomacy was about creating connections, not just managing conflicts. Each diplomatic mission became an opportunity to build bridges of understanding. Her team's approach was revolutionary. They arrived with comprehensive data, but also with empathy. They understood the historical traumas of different civilizations. They listened, truly listened, to the underlying hopes and fears behind official diplomatic positions. The Stellar Concordance Conference, which had been expected to end in another stalemate, instead became a turning point in galactic relations. Territories that had been contested for centuries were reimagined as collaborative zones of scientific and cultural exchange. Elder Zartok's voice cut through the memory. Humanity showed us that diplomacy is not about power, he told the assembled representatives. It's about understanding, connection, and shared potential. The holographic display continued to shimmer, a complex network of relationships that demonstrated how genuine communication could transform historical conflicts into opportunities for collective growth. The holographic display dissolved into a haunting reconstruction of the Proxima containment crisis, a moment that would be etched into galactic memory forever. Elder Zartok's neural interface projected memories of sacrifice that defied every conventional understanding of military engagement. The Void Collective approached the Proxima Junction with a level of technological advancement that made them seem almost invincible. Their fleet was a nightmarish amalgamation of quantum-level engineering and biological integration. Each ship was a living weapon, capable of destroying entire planetary systems with mere computational precision. The Proxima Junction was more than a strategic location. It was a critical nexus point that connected multiple galactic sectors. If the Void Collective successfully breached this junction, they would gain access to hundreds of populated worlds, condemning billions to destruction. The human defensive fleet was outnumbered 200 to 1. Captain Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the RSS Defiance, a vessel that had already become legendary through previous encounters. Around him, AI, crew that represented the most diverse and innovative fighting force in human history, prepared for what they knew would be their final mission. Intelligence reports were clear. No traditional defense would work. The Void Collective's computational warfare capabilities meant that every standard strategic approach would be anticipated and neutralized before implementation. What emerged was a plan that was part military strategy, part scientific innovation, and part collective sacrifice. The human fleet would not try to win in the conventional sense. They would transform themselves into a weapon more complex than any traditional military engagement could comprehend. Each ship began a complex reconfiguration. Scientific research vessels were integrated with military platforms. Computational systems were linked in ways that defied traditional military communication protocols. The entire fleet began to function as a single, massive computational and gravitational organism. Captain Chen understood the fundamental truth of their mission. They were not just defending a strategic point, they were protecting the potential for future life, for continued exploration, for the possibility of understanding that might emerge in the future. The Void Collective's initial attack was devastating. Entire sections of the human fleet were eliminated in microseconds. Computational warfare reached levels of complexity that seemed to transcend traditional understanding of conflict. But the human fleet had become something more than a traditional military force. As ships were destroyed, their computational matrices were transferred. Gravitational calculations became living weapons. The very destruction of each vessel became part of a complex mathematical strategy that the Void Collective could not predict. Mathematical models developed by the fleet transformed each destroyed ship into a computational node. Gravitational fields were manipulated in ways that created complex interference patterns. The fleet was becoming a massive distributed weapon that used its own destruction as a strategic element. In the final moments, Captain Chen made a decision that would be remembered across generations. The remaining ships would transform themselves into a massive gravitational and electromagnetic weapon. Their entire technological infrastructure, their computational power, their very existence would become a single, massive defensive mechanism. The resulting event was beyond traditional warfare. It was a moment of collective sacrifice that created a gravitational anomaly so complex that it not only stopped the Void Collective, but created a permanent defensive barrier that would protect multiple sectors for generations. Billions of lives were saved. Entire civilizations that would have been destroyed found themselves protected by a sacrifice that went beyond traditional understanding of military engagement. Elder Zartok's voice cut through the memory. Humanity demonstrated that true strength is not about survival, he told the assembled representatives. It is about protecting the potential of future generations. The holographic display shimmered, a complex representation of a sacrifice that redefined the very concept of defensive warfare. The assembled representatives sat in profound silence. They had witnessed something that challenged every conventional understanding of military engagement, of sacrifice, of collective potential.